everybody. Welcome and let's see. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Raising Excellence, and I am your MC and Opportunity Ambassador, Michael. And today's show is the continuation, the third part to the Fear versus Love. And we've got a special guest too. But let me first introduce our regular host, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator.
Hi, nice to be here. And I'll introduce my secret special guest. So I got
Okay,
an
very good.
introduction here.
And then Willow, our trauma consultant.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here tonight.
Nice. And
So I'll hand it over to
yourself,
you.
Michael, the community ambassador. The reason we don't know your title is because you're the one who gets skipped over.
Opportunity ambassador.
Opportunity ambassador. Yeah, that's what I'm going with these days. But let's turn it over to
Opportunity.
you and let's talk to our special guest because I'm pretty excited and I think this may be our very best show ever. But
Maybe if
let's
our
see.
special
It's
guest
definitely,
rejoins us.
I definitely like when we have guests.
Yeah, I do
Oh, it looks
too.
like he might be frozen.
Oh no,
Oh,
I'm here. I'm just waiting to be
Oh,
introduced.
come, come,
He's
come.
gonna he's gonna pop
Let
in.
me
drum roll.
introduce our special, secret special guest, the magical maverick wordsmith, musician maven extraordinaire, Benjamin Dasher. Now, I'll tell you, Benjamin Dasher was our most request or very requested song for Monday for Love versus Fear. Our listeners got involved in the show and they asked us to play his song. The song was so great and the Monday show was so popular, so many people loved it that we decided to have Benjamin as our guest for today. So we're going to be talking about different things, but we're also going to be delighted and better by the company of Mr. Benjamin Dasher.
Glad to be here and looking forward to the ride with y'all.
Nice.
Yeah.
I feel like a total derp, but I just put two and two together and I'm like, oh, you sang the song. I liked the song, by the way. You have a very lovely voice.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
I like the
Uh,
song too. I've been listening to it like a few times and I was told to turn it off.
Well, we had a discussion before the show started, and I'm telling you, we've got some electricity going here. So let's get into fear and love, fear
So
versus
so
love.
where did we leave it off yesterday? I think that yesterday we sort of kind of touched on what to do with emotions that are not really coming from inside, but perhaps are from the outside, and maybe even how to tell the difference between emotions that come from the inside and emotions come from the outside, you know. And, a lot of people might say, oh, how can emotions come from the outside? I'm the boss of my own body. Especially in your crowd, Michael, the anarchist community, they'd probably be appalled to think that some of their emotions come from outside. But unfortunately, go ahead.
Well, I think there's certainly programming and conditioning that kind of we emulate in a lot of ways, and if we're not really up to speed with all that stuff, all these experiences that we're having, our mind basically goes to the stuff that we've experienced from other ways of experience, like TVs and movies and media and so forth. And so, to a large degree, yeah, I, if this is if this is the line you're thinking, I certainly think there's emotions that we experience, or at least feelings that we experience that we've misconstrued as things that we think maybe other people are delivering, or how we actually feel about these things going on inside of us.
Yeah, so there's two ways to know. One way that I know from psychosomatic therapy is there are all sorts of automatic thoughts that go on in our mind, right? And we don't necessarily control these thoughts. We're not waking up in the morning and going, okay, today I'm going to think this thought. It doesn't really work that way. What happens is there is a stimulus, a trigger, a reminding, a feeling, maybe a situation that reminds you of something that happened before, and suddenly things start popping up in your mind. And so there are a couple different things that it could be that, it could be one of your parts but most of your parts talk about it's a version of your own voice. But there's this whole other thing that happens when somebody else's voice talks in your mind. When suddenly you hear your mother, your father, your grandfather, your first grade teacher, your best friend from way back when, way back then, who was so critical and said da 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 da, whatever it is. And so the one thing, the level one checking is whose voice is it that's speaking? Is it your own voice or is it a pre-recorded session from some past trauma? Willow? I said the word trauma. It's your turn.
Yeah, actually, and I'm a little torn because I want to like keep going with what you're going, but I already had a thought loaded in the chamber, so I'm gonna pull the trigger on that one. Last episode, you were talking about your friend who you text, or you were talking to her, and she said that out of reflex almost that she was stressed, and then you questioned her, and now that reminded me. It reminded me so much that I've been thinking about it since, enough to like remember that this is the thing I wanted to touch on. I have noticed that it's a form of communication. It's very similar to like trauma bonding, and I think it's Pete Walker or Derek Scott. I can't remember. I think it's Derek Scott who talks about being a bartender and having two guys come in and they're like, they just don't really have anything to talk about, and they all of a sudden like a sports team comes on. They're like, "Oh man, I hate the Yankees," and the other guy's like, "Oh yeah, I hate the Yankees too." And he was explaining, he was like, "Yeah, I guess these two men probably have like a lot of hate in common. But I bet if you ask them, do you have kids? They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I have kids. Yeah, I love watching them do this." And they would have bonded over a loving memory, but instead they bonded over a traumatic memory. So I've actually noticed myself do this, especially to my emo friends, my friends from high school who like get the goth scene. They get like all my weird idiosyncrasies. I just can be myself and be as weird as I want to be with them. Um, I will find myself falling back. Like things will be going great, having a fantastic day. And they'll text me and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've had a headache." Or I'm like, "Why am I saying this?" Like, "Yeah, I have a little bit of a headache, but it didn't bother me." Like I'm not actually upset about my day, but it's kind of like a reflex because that's what my brain is telling me how to get comfort and how to relate to other people. And I had to remind myself that yes, I can relate on that level and it does me good. But right now I want to relate on the level that I'm at, which is, man, I had a great day. So I've had to train myself to like really be honest with myself in those
Could
moments.
it be the egregor of the relationship? Like, for example, if you have a friend who always complains about certain ailments or whatever, and then that kind of a history builds up between you two, and so when you call her, you reflexively talk about your headache versus the other things that maybe are more positive.
Well, actually, with the friend that I was talking about, that's exactly what we do. So yeah.
Okay, I'm not psychic.
I'm
I
just like,
promise.
I'm like,
Let's
wait a
let's get
second.
Ben in here.
I'm like, have
Ben.
you been reading my text messages? Are you NSA?
I'm a face reader. I know more than you want.
We need to watch out for Agnieszka.
Benjamin, why
Ben, you
don't
had a
you
thought.
weigh in on this?
Indeed. Yeah, a couple have floated by. I think that's a really direct way of going through the process, Willow, when we notice that we can bond with friends over traumatic memories. I think I don't want to universally condemn that modality because there is a lot of like needs for comfort that can be met when talking to a friend, even in like not the most potentially wholesome language, but in a way that bonds and works as the person who is when the two of you interact. Right.
Yeah.
And like, so you guys both want to make that person happen. And that's like part of the dance of being friends. But if you can navigate that with a little bit more, if you can take yourself up to the space to say, you know what, today I recognize the headache, but I don't want to necessarily focus on that. In fact, I would prefer to see what it's like if I oriented my attention towards, I had a great day today. Oh yeah, I had the headache. We can joke about that. But if I wanted to start from there, but it depends on the friend and like, where,
Yeah.
what feels right contextually for that.
I really like the way you put that because that's exactly what I'm not always the best at communicating what I see or hear in my mind. So yeah, it's really nice when like other people put it into better words than me. I completely agree. I think it is necessary to have people you can talk to and be like, I need to complain, basically. I need to vent all this out, and that's healthy and it's normal and it makes you feel better. I just yeah, it's that changing of like when that's not necessary, I don't need to seek that out. It's not the
Right.
only way to relate to people, just anyone.
Yeah, and if both are playing the game at the same time, it can be useful. If one's not playing the I want to complain game, you have to keep aware of the other person's energies, I suppose. Um, but yeah, I think that's a good way to find the balance there if you can.
Absolutely. Very good observations, Mr. Benjamin.
Oh well, thank you.
I really love how you're such a great wordsmith. Earlier, talking to you was such a pleasure because you select words so carefully and eloquently. It's beautiful.
That's very kind of you to say. I pump in a bunch of incredibly eloquent people into my head for years and years and years and years and years, speaking about all types of things. And as you know, one dances around the words, it feels like I'm um, pulling at a lot of stuff, like the whole, you know, as much as I can gather from the internet, a lot of things at once for sure. So I appreciate you guys
Nice.
letting me
Nice.
try to do that, and hearing what you guys are saying, it's kind of what we all do at some level.
Well,
Um,
yes, that's why
I think it's
we're
something we can learn from too.
So
You
Kelly's
know.
Kelly's just commenting, and she is actually linking to what Benjamin just said, even though her comment is from a little earlier. She said that hearing someone else's voice in your head is not necessarily negative because it can be positive. And I agree, Kelly, and I'll read the rest of your comment in a moment, but I just want to address that for a second. I agree. But when something positive, like a pre-recorded message that's positive is popping up in our head, it's usually because we pressed that button. We're like, what when did I ever feel successful, or how did I? So we actually seem to be more, in my experience, for me maybe, I seem to have a more active role in selecting that thought versus if it's like, oh, you're such a loser, it just comes without being asked for, like, you know. And she also says,
yes.
some of my best thoughts and pre-recorded voices in my head are good. Some of the best physiological factors for me are the voices of others in my head. And yeah, absolutely. You can direct it, but just like Benjamin said, what do you choose to focus on today? What do you choose to direct your attention to or pay your attention, paying, like paying, pay your attention to.
Yeah. Time is
So
scarce.
I wanted to
You know.
point out,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
wanted to point out that in IFS, I understand the aspect or the point of view of the voice not being your own, and it does eventually boil down to that. So stick with me. But usually this is a part repeating this. So the voice itself is actually one of your own parts in IFS. It's usually an exile. Now the words that it's repeating are the lesson that it learned from the experience or from the other people, and that could have been verbally expressed to them. This is why this is happening to you. Um, but it is not. It's a misunderstanding. It's a incorrect or a fallacy, so that like that you've based a huge chunk of your personality off of. So in a way, it is not your voice. It is not like the entirety of your voice, but it is still a part of you, and it's still something that you are saying to yourself. But you got that information from somewhere that was external and was not necessarily a good authority to take their word for.
Nice.
I've got example of that kind of conditioning, or at least like a opportunity to kind of take that situation. Say, for example, let me explain this, and maybe it'll sound right, but the Oscar Mayer hot dog song. I can't get that thing out of my head, still to this day. But it's like a pleasant thought because it's associated with other things, like when we were kids and singing songs that we all knew and that worked together. That's the kind of the memory I have in my mind that song brings about.
Mm-hmm.
But these are like examples of events that happen in our lives, and we can really choose like how we understand those things, because I could also say, that corporate programming, oh! And just be traumatized by the fact that, man, they played it so many freaking times, I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah. I even know it, even though I didn't live in North America while it was playing. Isn't that crazy?
I was really afraid that it was going to come back to memory, and so I was doing everything I could to just be like, "What's the Scooby Doo theme song? What was the Teletubby theme song? I don't know anything but that. Please, anything but that."
So
Yeah.
Adam says that he has Jordan Peterson in his head and not just when he's cleaning his room. So
Yeah, me too, man. Don't worry.
I love Jordan Peterson. I think he's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good things to say. It's interesting with the Oscar Mayer Wiener thing. What I was hearing you say, Michael, was sort of the way like the salience of memes, right? Oscar Mayer is a meme. We can think about all these things as just like memes. What sticks in the head and why, and kind of true for all of us. This is if you ask that question broadly, you can also bring that to the question of even figuring out how to discern which voices are mine and which voices are others from the world. And sometimes the things that get stuck in our head could be for, well, really like reasons of salience as a kid. Like we, respond to the voices that help us survive and get by and deal with our environment as they are. Then when we grow up and we realize the world is not that environment, like we still have these salience memes. I don't know. It's a little abstract, but so how do we actually then, to me, it's the difficult question, Agnieszka, is how to discern what feels more internal and what feels more external, because it really is, I mean, we are the product so much of culture. We didn't create language. We didn't create, so much of ourselves are not us. Like the boundaries are complex, fluid,
So what Willow said about it being an exiled part of who we really are, that was interesting, and I thought about it, and I thought about how I deal with the because I through psychosomatic therapy education I was able to get rid of most of those. Like I mean, yeah, I'm sure they still come up like when I'm stressed or pressured or whatever. All our programming comes up, but I don't have negative self talk come up throughout the day on 90% of the days now. But so how did I deal with it? Like, it used to be so frequent and it used to be there every day. My father's voice in my head every single day, yammering at me, right? And so I don't know if I wasn't really mean to it. I wasn't really like, oh, you have to shut up. I was like, whoa, no, that's not us. That's not us. That's not us. Right? And as soon as it's not us, it's outside. And so like what is us? Oh, us is compassionate and loving, and we want to be a good parent to ourselves. We don't want to be that kind of
Bingo.
parent.
That's what you did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to break in there because that is exactly what you did. You reparented yourself. You made that decision. That's why I think that a lot of people express their trauma. I can't tell you how many friends I've had who their trauma just came out right after their second child. It tried to come out after their first child, but they had to do some stuff. They could not take time. And then at the second child, almost every single one of them who has had trauma, they can't keep it together. They're like, I've done this for years, and now all of a sudden my coping mechanisms don't work. And I'm like, yeah, it's because your kids are the opportunity to prove that you maybe were not raised the way you should have been. Maybe you weren't parented or comforted when you needed to be. And this is the opportunity to change that, but it's also going to highlight the things that you were lacking, and that's really painful.
Yeah.
And that might sound judgmental. Hang on, Benjamin, if you have a thought. I just want to add something to that. That might sound judgmental toward parents, right? Because we know for a fact that all parents, even the assholes, they really believe that they're doing the best job because everybody is a hero in their own story, right? And some people's parents are really, really good. They really are. But those people still come out traumatized. And why is that? And it's a very simple answer. And once you see it, it's super simple because you're the only person. Hang on. You want to answer? You want me to okay, go.
No, I was gonna say that a lot of the things though that we're doing are not necessarily our conscious mind. Just like riding a bicycle, there's a lot of stuff that we just kind of create in our subconscious mind that are routines, and a lot of those things are our parents. that our parents taught us, and essentially we just soaked it in. We never really even consciously made a decision about it, but in a lot of cases, then when we go to parent our children, we're essentially just acting out things that we thought, like that's how our parents did it, and probably our grandparents, and
But that doesn't
even
mean that
before
there was
that.
something wrong with their
Yeah.
parenting,
Well,
right?
I was gonna say,
Hang
I
on, let
was
me
gonna
finish because
add in here. This it adds to your point. It's not just the parents who do
We'll get it
parenting
back.
and help raising. It's your grandparents, it's the people you meet, the people you are around all the time. So yeah, like Agnieszka said, it's not just the fact that like parents just get it wrong and they intentionally hurt their kids. I don't think that's the case. No one intentionally wants to hurt their children.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
off
so
to you.
okay, so it's all with the individual, right? Because for example, say I'm an extrovert who is a sapphire, very theater oriented person, right? And my child's an introvert who is maybe an emerald, right? There is no advice that I can give that person. Like literally all of the advice, all of the tools and techniques that work for me do not work for that person. So I can parent them all I want and I can be the best freaking parent there is. But none of my abilities, or very few of my abilities, will actually be useful for that person because they can't operate on the same platform. Not higher or lower, just different. You know what I mean?
Certainly.
Yeah. That's interesting. I suppose it would be intrinsically suboptimal to be a parent of a different kind of personality type. But I still wonder if the wise parent who notices, has the wisdom to notice that their kid is of a different personality type, is not doing the projection mapping game onto their own kids, then they could, find reasonable enough ways to augment that, so that they could still help their kids get their, emeraldy needs met or whatever.
Like, oh my gosh, Billy, you're so quiet. You need to go talk to girls. Let me pay for prostitutes to get you out of that hall. Okay, that's an extreme example. I'll back out.
Well,
So.
I was gonna say it also creates a divide because I can't tell you how many times in my family, numerous people in my family have looked at me over the years and been like, "You're too skinny. You're way too skinny. You need to. Are you anorexic? Are you bulimic? Are you doing coke? And then they add all the other drugs in there. They're like, what all causes weight loss? They couldn't imagine that I'm just like this is just my normal weight. But they do the same things to my sisters who are much bigger than me. They'll be like, you're too big. And it causes a divide because I've had my sisters actually look at me when I've tried to comfort them for being made fun of and called fat. I've tried to comfort them and they have looked at me and said, you will never understand what it's like to be made fun of because you are big. And I said, no, but I do want to understand what it's like to be not accepted for what you are at the time and told that that's inherently that you are bad because of that. And I think that there is ways to avoid that. And we need to stop. Like, parents who have, like, say I'm a Sagittarius or Sapphire. I get those two mixed up a lot. I am both Sapphire and Sagittarius.
Aren't they the same word but just with different letters?
I think so. But like, yeah, if I have a child who is different than me, I think maybe a lot of people in general, when they see someone reacting differently than their own selves, they take it as a invalidation of their own method. Like, if I did the right thing, then why isn't everyone else doing it? Why is this other person finding a different way? Is that better? Should I have tried harder? And then it starts that internal process that isn't actually healed. I think that's the biggest issue, is people pretending that they're healed and then going about life as if, oh, I'm good, everything's fine, and I'm not going to make those mistakes because I don't have those hang-ups.
Yeah. But it's even sorry, go ahead. Ben. No, go ahead.
All right. I was wondering, Willow, if actually, let me pass it on back to you. I want to clarify my question for myself a little better.
All right. So
Yeah, sorry.
it doesn't have to be something heavy, right? Like there's some stupid thing from my childhood, right? So when I was a child, my hair was this is my natural hair color now. I've grown it all out myself. But when I was a child, my hair was very, very blonde. And my mom called me her little Goldilocks, right? Oh, my little Goldilocks. Oh, you're so cute, da 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 da, right? So as I became 16, 17, 18 years old, my hair started going darker. And my mom started commenting on it. It's like, oh, my little Goldilocks doesn't look so goldy anymore. What's going on with your hair? It's not so goldy anymore. And so somehow as a late teens, I was like, oh, I need to go back. So I started dyeing my hair to go back to that color that I had as a 10-year-old. And all my life for until I was 40, or maybe even later, because I've only really cut off the last dyed hair a couple years, 2 or 3 years ago. So most of my life I had colored my hair, and at like 5 different times I tried to go back to my natural hair color. And as soon as I did, somebody would comment, "Oh, you're so good. So you're so much cuter with blonde. You should be blonde," and people would just bombard me with that, like my family. "Oh, you were always blonde before," you know. And so it's this pressure, and it's stupid. Like it's hair color. It's not even something that I'm emotionally attached to, but yet, it. Every time they would say something, I would end up going back. And this time, my mom's like, "Oh, why is your hair so dark?" And I just said to her, "Yeah, I think I look better with the dark hair. I kind of like it. And a lot of gray in it. It's making it really nice." And that was that.
Well, that's an interesting comment about how people view you, and certainly, there's been studies that essentially demonstrate how people are very, you know, fearful about change, and especially their interpretations of how their friends and stuff, and once that's jiggered with a little, oh boy, it gets scary, and they kind of react to that.
But maybe me getting my hair darker made them feel older. Because if I don't have the baby blonde hair, then maybe that I'm an adult. And if I happen to be an adult, then what does that make them?
Right.
So you asked a question, like how do we stop this like diving? I call it the downward spiral. Like how do we stop like getting close enough to the edge where we know we're gonna slip? Um, and then you told the hair story, and that reminded me of one of the first moments when I was really young that I realized that I might have self-esteem issues. Was the whole point of this is to draw a contrast. I think that's one of the biggest ways to highlight that contrast. When someone is being extremely nice to you, but they're pushing you, and you're reacting as if they're attacking you, that's a clear sign. And you could almost see it yourself, where you're like, why am I reacting like they're attacking me? I can see it now. It makes it easier for you to accept, a lot easier. I actually just experienced that this morning, which was wonderful. um, but when I was really young, I wanted the long in the front, short in the back, asymmetrical hair or A-frame. And my older stepsister had it. And my stepmother told me that it was rude to copy another woman's hairstyle, especially one that you lived with, because I was stealing her thunder, basically. And I was like
Sounds
10 or 11,
sounds
so I
like
was like, I don't understand.
sounds like an
Let's
evil
not even
stepmother.
let's not even go on. Let's not even go on that topic. Let's just take it for what it is. I was like, okay, fine. I won't steal her thunder. I actually don't want to, ruin her day. It might be embarrassing that her kid sister has the same haircut as her. Fine, whatever. So I waited until she got a different haircut, and it was like 4 years later. And I was in 8th grade, and I was like, fine, can I get this haircut? And my stepmother said, fine. She was in a good mood. She cut my hair, and we colored it red. And it just looked amazing. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted. Even though it was out of style at that point, like I was the only person that had it, and everyone was like, that was like last year. I'm like, I don't even care. Uh, but then I upset my stepmother, and she took the kitchen scissors to my hair and butchered it. Like butchered it bad. I had wings. I looked like a boy. And I've had a bowl cut before, and I looked like a boy. So I go to school, and I'm super like nervous. The school bully that's picked on me since elementary school decides to tell me that she's just being mean to me says some rude things, makes me cry. But then a bunch of other people actually said I looked really good, and they thought that I was really brave for having that haircut. So I kind of like had a little bit of confidence. But then my best friend also got her haircut as short as mine. And the school bully decided to like attack her verbally in the choir room. And she was like, your hair, it looks like you got in a fight with a blender and you lost really, really bad. And I just turned around and I just like, I said, I said, F you, you're just a bully. Yeah, basically, I just like did one of those high school where I'm just like, I'm going to stand up to you and be like, no, you need to stop being a bitch. This is below you. I can't believe that, and I just told her off. And at that moment, I realized that a week before, this girl had basically told me the same thing. And I was like, oh man, does it really look that bad? Oh God. Like I got really embarrassed until other people started telling me that I looked cool. And then without even hesitating, they said it to my best friend. And I was like, you're a bitch. Nuh-uh. No, absolutely not. Like you can say that to me, but you're not going to hurt her feelings like that. Absolutely not. And I realized at that moment, I was like, I might have self-esteem issues. I'm not going to admit it to anyone. No, but I might.
It's always easier to defend others,
Yeah.
It's the mom
Well,
override.
that was certainly a traumatic experience delivered by your stepmother, though. My God.
That was trauma light.
Gotcha. So one of the themes I'm hearing here kind of amongst this is like why, the who, what, when, where, whys, and hows of like the fact that in many families there is like a culture of unrequested judgment, right? That's kind of at the center. And to use like NVC language, like that's the game. We like, we presume that our opinions should cause you pain and pleasure, and we give them to you without your consent. And these kind of like, I don't call them microaggressions, but something about subtle breaches of autonomy from parents to kids who have the authority, to without saying, if you care about, would you like to hear my opinion on X? That's the NVC language. It's a kind of, it's a little clunky and formal potentially, but again, just having that, not lacking that spirit, like, why do we think that our families are so, I guess we can answer that. We know that we're just all living in a, past of trauma that we're all just dealing with in a lot of ways. But, why is that? How is it augmented or changed for the better so that we can?
In a lot of cases, these are actually situations in which the person that's initiating it or getting angry or whatever is experiencing something in themselves that is hurtful. And so that's where this kind of thing gets passed on, is that they're traumatized, and then that they see that instance, and then they deliver more trauma.
Right. And it's hard to be when you're the kid at the other side of it. It's hard to be the compassionate witness of their trauma, like a good therapist, and,
right.
Mirror it back to them in a way that helps them move up. But
that's certainly something we should be teaching the children. It's certainly something we should be teaching the children to be looking out for. At least is saying, hey, when people are angry and foolish, more than likely it's a lot more about them than about whoever they're bantering on, and possibly bullying or any other thing.
Right. We project that there's something wrong with us.
And if that bully is repeating that to you in the playground, or in the choir room or whatever, what is she hearing from her parents and her family? Like, what is her household talk like, if that's what comes out of her mouth?
Right. Plus, she's in a unchosen hierarchy of unchosen peers trapped together, as is the public school situation. I mean, the entirety. Even if we had really, I wonder if even if we had really good parenting, all around, if you put kids in the structure of public schooling, if where kids are at, if like, pernicious hierarchies aggression hierarchies don't just develop, and like it's like the structure's made to.
Yeah, it's the whole design, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is it's a little late in the conversation because we were just talking about like children but it was really important. One of the most powerful things that I say to children when they ask about why their parents made a mistake, because I'm pretty easy to talk to, so like my nieces and nephews will just ask me, be like, oh, why are adults so crazy? And they're talking about their parents. I had a friend who slipped up. She had a moment of frustration. She spanked her daughter, and she told me, and I was like, that's not. I don't agree that that's the right thing to do. You made a mistake. You need to admit you made a mistake. And then this little girl came up and asked me. She said something like her mom kind of was like, oh, you need to do this, and she's like, and if I don't, are you gonna hit me? And I looked at her and I was like, I know that your mom doesn't hit you. And she's like, well, why did she do it before? I said, because you are still seeing your mom grow just like you are. You're seeing your parents grow as they are raising you, and they're going to make mistakes. And the easier you make it for them to say sorry, that's
Dude,
one of the biggest.
crazy, yeah.
That's such a big issue. It's like, it's so hard to admit that you're wrong because you think that there's an inherent problem with you, when in reality we just make mistakes and we have emotions that are really big and we don't really know how to handle them.
Except my parents, they're perfect. They've never made a mistake.
Of course. I have a set of parents who would probably say the exact same thing. Just the one set. The other is pretty good.
Fallible. The other set is fallible.
The other set I probably would never leave my children with. I'm like, nope, sorry.
I love that idea though of recognizing that even the kid has the power to initiate the empathy in the scene. Really, the adults should be the ones to do it. But to say to the kid, like, hey, like, she's growing, and if you recognize that that she's trying and growing, whatever level kids can get that at, wherever they're at, like that can start the positive feedback loop in the same way. And I guess it's, at any level of, whether we're 60-year-olds with our 80-year-old parents or, whatever level down, we can empathize with them and get that train rolling and see, and recognize how hard. But that, again, I guess that takes a wise aunt coming from the outside and be like, hey, she's trying, kid.
But also, and I'd like to clarify that I know that I was a kid. I remember doing this. When things feel rough and it feels unfair, you'll take any slight comment that you can. If you see an opening there to be like, I'm gonna make my parents look a little bad in front of their friends, and that's kind of what she was doing. And I was like, hey,
that's vindictive, but she's a kid.
I'm like, I understand you're a kid, but you have to when your parents admit that they've made a mistake. If you don't want them to hold your mistakes against you, you can't do that to other people as well, and your parents are humans as well. So it opens this bridge of empathy where it's like, it's okay to make a mistake, and it's okay to admit it and change your behavior. And the parents really have to be the parents and the adults in the situation. They should be the model, because the children don't know this. If they figure it out, that's fantastic, but they really shouldn't be put in situations where they're the ones who have to figure it out. That's not decisions that children are equipped to make. That's why they are children and you are the adults and you're their caretaker.
Right. And if you don't, they're going to have to read internal family systems over and over again to figure out how to navigate their own, energies.
Well, actually, there's a John Maxwell book. I think it's 25 ways to improve your results or something like that. But in it, he talks about, like catching people doing the right things. And I think he uses an example of a person that's talking about their parent that essentially gave them the latitude and didn't assume the worst, but assumed the best. And how that related to how they dealt with each other, as and how effective that was at like empowering them to like take on the responsibility for their own lives. And certainly it's the same way with businesses and employees and really kind of the masters and the apprentices getting that opportunity to like say, hey, that was a mistake, but I assumed that you were trying to do something awesome. And what was that? And so then like when the mistake happens, it's not like, oh God, it's like, man, I tried, but and then they can say, oh yeah, well, I tried that way too, and here's what I learned, and boom, man, you're really accelerating in another whole direction in which these possibly traumatic situations can be then turned into, yeah, I can fail, and man, I freaking failed like a sob, but son of a gun, I learned these major things, and now I'm like, super confident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hang on. So let's bring it back to because we only have a few minutes left, and I know that there's another item that we have, or two other items that we have to cover today. But before we do that, how can the title of this episode is "Ready to Embrace Love and All Its Friends," and we have been talking around it, but we haven't been talking directly to it throughout this episode. So let's just list all the ways that we figured out that we can embrace love and all its friends. Just remembering from the other episode that, fear and anger and all of those are sort of sit on one end and love sits on the other, and compassion. Let me see if I can grab that picture again. There we go. The emotional guidance scale. So there's all the frustrating emotions on one side and all the joyful emotions, and it sort of flows from one to the other. And so the question is, how can we have a more directive role in making that change, in choosing how we feel on any given moment? Like, how do I choose the next step? And that can be done through effective self-parenting. That can be done in effective choosing what focus, right? Do we focus on the headache or on the good day that we had? You probably had a good headache because there was so much positive stimulus that morning that you got a headache from it.
My technique is it's also based off of IFS. A lot of people will go with curiosity, but I like compassion. So you can have compassion for your fear. You can have compassion for your anger. You can have compassion for every single one of your good and negative feeling emotions. And then that will extend to compassion for, and this is a touchy subject, so I'm not saying compassion for your abusers in the way that like you say that everything they did was not their fault, or it wasn't, really them. You make excuses for them, because that's not being compassionate. That's enabling. That's not being compassionate. Being compassionate is saying, why would a person be driven to do these things? What in their mind happened to teach them the lesson that this is what is normal and what should be passed on to the next generation? Because somewhere along the line, they were wholly convinced of it. Otherwise, they would never have done it. And that is really, really hard, because it's hard to have compassion for people who have hurt you. I was just saying this the other day, that I have very little compassion for the cop who flips his lights on just to get past traffic. And you said, well, what if he's on the way to his mom's, in the hospital? And I'm like, he shouldn't be in his cop car. Like, I recognize that's lacking a little bit of compassion, because it is hard to have compassion for people who are perpetuating the abuse, because you are not. You are trying not to. And so everyone who does is like that threat where it's like, why do you get to take the easy way out? Why do you get to just perpetuate all this trauma?
What if it's not the easy way out? What if it's just them providing contrasts so that you can learn what's a better course of action?
Discernment without judgment?
I don't know.
I'm not gonna say that that's not plausible. I don't like that. There's something that does not sit well with me, because, and of course my mind just went blank as soon as I tried to figure out why that does not sit well with me.
That's your inner child erasing it from the board.
I think so. And I'm like looking in my mind. I'm like, who did it? Which one? Which one of you?
So, hey, Ben, did you have an item that you wanted to share with us?
I did. I was going to play a song. Is that the item we were referring to, right?
Yes. Do you still want to do that?
I do. And I'm going to sum up my version of how to embrace love and friends, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm thinking that we can look at it from Eastern perspective, which is like pure witness, right? We can look at it from like an archetypal Jungian kind of, space, where we can look more at our emotions, not as ourselves personally, but it's just like, energies, archetypal land. These are the internal family systems stuff. And then the lens of compassion, which Will was talking about, which is absolutely like can be at the center of this stuff, which to me comes from a very Eastern place. And the reason it comes from an Eastern place is it goes like this. Compassion is recognizing that you absolutely don't know the causes and conditions that caused anybody else's actions at any time, literally ever. And that is a state of radical uncertainty. And that uncertainty is fucking terrifying. It's scary to know how little you know about anything. And so it's like fear, there's okay, that's as far as I got with the thought, but.
That's good. That's good.
I love it. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay.
Ooh, more music. I love it.
Right. Okay. The song's called Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown. So make sure I get the right note starting off. Okay, sounds right. All right. Don't wait too long. No, I'm in the wrong key. Okay. Don't wait too long. My time will come and pass. Will I sit under the Bodhi tree with Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown? Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown. Open the gates and walk through the garden. Someone is watching you. And don't criticize what you can't underestimate. Forgetting the flavor of sitting forever, intending no ending, just shaking in terror with Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown. Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown. Cat, are you kidding me? There's a cat in my face. And the song's over. Mickey and Buddha, Charlie Brown. Mickey and Buddha and Charlie Brown.
If I had had a lighter handy, I would have.
Right.
I like your songs very, very much. They're very cool. I love
Thank
the
you for
lyrics.
Appreciate it.
You have a very
real
calming, like the melodies are just really calming and soothing. I don't even know how to
I'm
describe.
a pretty mellow dude, it's true. In my musical space, for sure. For sure. So yeah, thank you. Kitty, look, we got a cat. Yeah.
I love the bobtail.
Yeah. We don't. He's an idiot. We don't know how he lost it.
Oh.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Yeah, my sister got him. He was already all messed up and tailless. And then she had a second cat, and then they didn't get along, so she dumped this one on me. Oh, it worked out. Yeah. Hey. Yeah.
I thought maybe like you had him and then all of a sudden one day he came home and didn't have his tail. And I was like, that must have been horrifying.
Oh, thank goodness. No. Yeah. I don't let him out of the house. I don't trust him.
Well, I could see it happening because like it wasn't until my dog who's passed away now, it was a couple months we saw his tail and the end of his tail was like this much of it was crooked.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, when did that happen? I didn't know he broke his tail and it set crooked. And I was like, I didn't even know that he broke his tail. Like he didn't say anything, didn't make any noise.
Right.
Now he's got a
You
crooked
have
tail.
no idea what's going on with these things. These creatures. They won't tell
Well,
you.
I'll throw in a couple things on The Rise of the Superman. Has anybody heard of that book? That the idea is we're talking about the flow state and essentially like being at a higher level and maintaining it rather than just kind of bouncing off of it, like having a joyful moment and then coming back down to whatever normal is, but actually getting up to a level and then moving with it, flowing with it. And of course, athletes, this is like this moment where you like time is almost endless, and you have this like feeling of like complete control. But there is that kind of feeling of joy and love, and when you're in it, um, things come real easy, and work doesn't seem to be work anymore. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, that they like experience joy or love, but they only experience it for like a second or a minute or maybe even an hour. But that's like, well, that's my love, that's my joy. And the reality is you can live like that. You can be like that all the time.
There's also many people who their intense joyous feelings are tied up in intense moments of pain. And I know that sounds really strange. And it's not a concept to like sit easy. It doesn't sit with you well, but or at least not a lot of people. I know a lot of people who are just like, I don't like the way that sounds. But when you get so used to not feeling and feeling numb, intense feelings can feel really good and they can produce dopamine, serotonin, and then you get used to having those really intense feelings and that's the only time you feel good. So you kind of get addicted to feeling pain and
That's
you
true.
expect to feel pleasure and then pain or pain and then pleasure. Uh, so it can get really confusing. Well, healing from trauma begins with loving yourself. You have to love yourself enough to want to heal. I'm just a basket case that I love. So, no, not Easter basket, basket case.
The fallacy of the week. Ah, there
I'm
is a
wondering how closely that relates to gaslighting. Is it? Is it?
Well, it reminds me of the picture that you paint in your head. Yeah, so in from external, an external source, yeah, it would be gaslighting because sometimes you can kind of gaslight yourself. Uh, although I'm pretty sure it's called something different.
now
Sorry,
it's light
I didn't
side
mean
of
to
the
cut mic off.
it's if you can you guys hear me still?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Cool.
got you.
Okay. The light side of the force corollary would be the steel man, in which instead of trying to intentionally frame your opponent's argument as weaker than it is, you make it so that they say, boy, I wish I could have said it that good myself. And if you have that argumentative principle to mirror each other, I really like the way you frame argument. Let's continue. That's kind of game B. That's the collaborative conversation that moves us forward. Steel manning, the opposite of straw manning, can be a very powerful concept. And catching, which is what we do here, by the way, intrinsically. This is part of the milieu here. Part of what you guys do is that because you care about understanding what each other's
You know,
thinking.
this is really you just hit on a
Nice.
really you just hit on a really relatable topic because actually that is the second time I've heard that today and it's also the second time I've heard it in my life. And the reason I heard it was because I was having a conversation with my husband and I was getting emotional, but I didn't really understand why and I thought it was because of the conversation. And he told me that. He said, "Okay, steel man what I just said." And I was like, Steelman, what you just said, what are you talking about? Define that, please. And he said, tell me what I just said, basically. Build up the argument. And I couldn't. I couldn't even remember what we were talking about. And that was one of the first signs where I was like, I'm dysregulated. I'm being emotional I'm having an emotional reaction to something else beyond this conversation, because this conversation, I agree with you, yet I'm reacting as if you are attacking me. And that was what I was saying. You have to paint that contrast, because if you don't see it yourself, someone trying to force it on you, that ties into our conversation before the show when we were talking about like coercion is never the right option. It's only going to breed rebellion and resentment. You have to learn how to master both the wolves in your mind.
Yep. Collaborate.
Well, that's a great conclusion, being that we started with the wolves.
And with the wolves. Oh. Jesus, people.
But this is the great part. So the last week was swimming in trauma, getting used to it, learning how to swim in that pool. Now we're going to learn how to get out of that pool when needed, and then when to go back in, when to get out. Maybe. We're going to show you how to step out of that pool.
Be the ocean, not the waves. One way to put it.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I would just remind the audience that, of course, we are grateful and thankful for their time and attention. And then certainly when we do our show is Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And then also, shoot, there was something else I wanted to add in there. We're growing, and we should be thankful for that. So all the people that are tuning in, obviously it's the word is getting around, and we're starting to move in a bigger direction.
Yes, of course. I'm here to now express my gratitude for letting me sit in on the conversation and jam with y'all. Total joy. And be in the whole autonomy community thing. It's just, it embridles optimism in some nice way. So happy to be with the crew. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. You've been a real pleasure as a guest. We'd probably love to have you back.
Yes, absolutely. You should come back.
Thank you. I would love to. Wait, what? Me?
Here we go.
Cat. Every time I play. It sounds like outro music.